Taylor Swift, Song Analysis. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Some time ago, I established that Taylor Swift is a narcissist, and she's a greater, meaning that she's aware of what she is. She knows that the games must always be played, and she revels in that. She relishes the particular facade that she generates and enjoys drawing in men, chewing them up and spitting them out, and then singing about them. This has been something of a calling card for Taylor Swift, which makes it seem like she's the one that's been hard done to, but actually she's laughing down her sleeve at both the victims that have been thrown to one side and also those who express sympathy and support for her, as they don't realise that she's entirely in control of these interactions and that she's simply milking the audience in a particular way to continue to enable a particular facade to be generated, and she finds it wholly amusing that they fall for it time and time again. A little while ago, I dissected for you the song Anti-Hero to help you understand what Taylor Swift was actually singing about. Another provider of information, albeit often gets it wrong in relation to narcissism, completely misunderstood the nature of that song and revealed that their credentials vis-a-vis narcissism are nowhere near as good as they might like to think that they are. Interestingly, some other people have now looked at the songs of Taylor Swift and interpreted them, but they've done so with regard to attachment style. The Daily Mail, via Emily Joshu, reports Taylor Swift's unhealthy attachment style, according to behaviour experts who have forensically analysed all of her songs. Now, attachment styles is not something that I have spoken about with regard to my work. It's simply this: we attach you to us by virtue of the necessity of controlling you. But it is understandable that certain attachment styles might be described, and there is value in that. Those attachment styles, for instance, may well be applicable to people who are not narcissists and tells us something about them. But it is interesting to see what is stated with regard to the analysis of Taylor Swift's songs vis-a-vis framing it as against attachment style. The report tells us Taylor Swift has spent nearly 2 decades writing songs about her past relationships. Since her debut album was released in 2007, right up until her most recent Eras tour, she has sung about finding love, getting her heart broken, starting fresh, and every step along the way. Now, pausing there, the reason that Taylor Swift does this is that she knows, as part of manipulation of the audience, that songs about love, finding love, maintaining love, unrequited love, heartbreak, resonate with a particular demographic. That demographic, as they perhaps find their own way in the world, look to songs like those of Taylor Swift's to provide them with confirmation, validation, guidance, that the songs are almost a friend in the wilderness of the teenage years and young adulthood. Taylor Swift is certainly savvy enough to understand that by talking about these things, singing about them, there is a ready audience that latches onto it. Couple that with some decent songwriting, then there's a winning formula. The 34-year-old has also enjoyed relationships with a string of high-profile lovers, see parts passing for an analysis of that, with Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce at the top of her list after splitting from British actor Joe Alwyn earlier this year. Fans have long theorized that certain albums are directly inspired by certain ex-beaux, including John Mayer, Speak Now, Jake Gyllenhaal, Red, and Harry Styles, 1989. Remember also that when Taylor Swift writes about these exes in a song, It enables her to assert indirect control over them by talking about them in a disparaging way, and that her audience agrees with her, that the fans agree, and in the circumstances, that then means that she gains that control and fuel. Psychologists and behaviour experts have told DailyMail.com that Taylor's extensive discography may point towards an anxious attachment style and toxic and self-destructive behaviour. Interesting. Let's read on. Although none of the experts have worked with the pop star directly, all have studied the romantic-themed lyrics in her songs. The topic of attachment styles has generated much attention on social media over the past few years as more millennial and Generation Z, or Z, users engage in psychological therapy. So-called attachment theory is nearly a century-old idea from psychologists John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth that examines how infanthood and early childhood relationships impact relationships throughout your life, particularly romantic ones. There are thought to be styles of attachment: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. For example, if your parents were attentive and reliable, you are more likely to develop a secure attachment style. This means you don't live in fear of being abandoned by a partner, or push people away to avoid getting hurt. However, if parents were distant, there is a higher risk of developing an insecure attachment style, such as anxious or avoidant. Now, of course, those attachment styles may well be applicable to non-narcissists, but also, how might they apply to a narcissist? Well, of course, if parents were distant and the genetic predisposition to narcissism existed and has been passed down, that distance could create a lack of control environment and would then create a narcissist. The narcissist would be seen as having an insecure attachment style because of the fear of the loss of control, which would be translated of a fear of the loss of those individuals. Online, the debate regarding Taylor Swift's attachment style has rumbled on for several years among her fans. On Reddit, a thread with hundreds of thousands of comments seems to conclude that the 34-year-old's attachment style is anxious. People with this type of attachment often feel insecure in their relationships. I can tell you now, Taylor Swift does not feel insecure in the slightest in relation to her relationships. There is, of course, beneath the surface, a concern that that individual may depart and threaten her control, but her narcissism will always deal with it. She may portray an image of insecurity because that works with regard to controlling an audience of tens of millions of people. By causing them to believe that she's the one that's been hard done to in the relationship, those individuals are supportive. But in actual fact, it is Taylor Swift who is the one that draws in these men, utilizes them, and then disengages from them. But she then portrays them as the protagonist, that they are the perpetrator, and that they have done harm to her. She doesn't do this because she wants sympathy, although it is provided. She does this because she recognizes that portraying herself in that way is the best way of controlling that huge audience that buy her records, buy her albums, and come to her concerts. The report states that even if people with that style of attachment still feel close to and supported by their partners, they are plagued with fears of abandonment. Now, Taylor Swift may well have concerns about that person leaving her because that would be a threat to control. It also suggests they're plagued with fears of mistrust. Well, of course, the narcissist is slow to trust individuals. Also, in relation to low self-esteem, believe me, Taylor Swift does not have low self-esteem. It explains that the hallmark symptom is hyperactivation, which involves constantly looking for signs that your partner is going to leave you. Instead, what happens with Taylor Swift is that her narcissism will interpret certain behaviours as threatening her sense of control. She isn't spending her time believing that her partner is going to leave her. Why? Because she's Taylor Swift. Why on earth would they ever leave her? She's beautiful, talented, wealthy, famous, magnetic. No man would want to leave her. So it's incorrect to suggest that she spends her time believing that they're going to leave. She may well have a concern that certain of the behaviours that they exhibit will be a threat to control and could lead to departure. But it is not the case that she would repeatedly ask for assurance, as the article suggests, or think that small problems could threaten the entire relationship. Small problems would be viewed, however, as a threat to control. An anxious attachment style has been associated with mental health difficulties, as well as feeling like you're losing control in daily life, according to a 2015 study in the journal Frontiers in Psychology. I've always loved Taylor Swift, and it's wild to me how many of her songs are literally taken from My Thoughts Attachment Theory, the original poster wrote. Delicate is literally about that beginning feeling of relationship fragility. Believe me, Taylor Swift doesn't feel fragile in the beginning of a relationship. She is the all-conquering alpha female that has secured yet another man. But what she understands is that many of her audience feel this way. She observes, she listens, and she understands that the most appropriate way to ensure engagement by her audience is to talk about the beginning of that fragility so it resonates with them. It's similar in the way that I was able to write that short eulogy for Doug Kramer, who died last week. Not because I feel any of those things, but I understand that what is merited, that is what would resonate with an audience, and that is why it's done. Taylor Swift, as a greater narcissist, understands inside out her audience, and therefore she writes records which are meaningful to them, so those people buy them and think, Taylor understands me. It creates that parasocial relationship. Taylor Swift isn't saying, this is my relationship. What she's doing is saying, if you want to think that's the way that I am, that's absolutely fine, because if that makes you think that you and I are similar, so that you're drawn to me, you'll be easier to control. I will get the residual benefit of you coming to my concerts and buying my records. But that isn't actually how my relationships are. It's how I make you think that they are, so that you believe you and I are similar. Thus, it's a form of mirroring that is undertaken by her to draw those fans in. The fan continues by saying, tolerate it 100% sounds like an anxious, avoidant relationship. The posted highlights lyrics such as, I notice everything you do or don't do from the song Tolerate It on her 9th studio album, Evermore. User Azafran wrote, it would appear that a lot of pop culture romanticism is centered highly on anxious and avoiding dynamics. Indeed, remember, as I've explained to you on so many times before, much of what you listen to, much of what you read, much of what you see in films and television is created by narcissists. Not all of it. But what then happens is that the narcissistic view bleeds into that mainstream. Thus, the insecurities of the mid-range narcissist are portrayed as a particular type of love, which is picked up on by fans. When it comes to Taylor Swift, she's not anxious. She's not avoidant. She's secure in the way that she ensnares people, but she understands the way that other people are in relationships. And therefore, in the circumstances, it enables her to assert control by mirroring her fans, by talking about the way a relationship is, to assert control over them, draw them in, draw fuel from them, and obtain, of course, the appropriate residual benefits. And therefore, this analysis of her songs to suggest that she has an anxious attachment style is actually a red herring. It's done purposefully by her to create a particular image which the fans buy into. Another wrote, I wouldn't be surprised considering how much older guys like John Mayer and Jake Gyllenhaal screwed with her head in the early 20s, user Smitty Doodle said. Again, she's able to portray them as the perpetrator. The singer famously dated pop star John Mayer in 2009 for several months, followed by movie star Jake Gyllenhaal in 2010. Weird Sconce said they wondered if Taylor had an anxious attachment style and listed several lyrics from songs on the 2019 album Lover that they felt were indicative of it. One of these examples included snippets from The Archer, Combat, I'm ready for combat, Help me hold on to you, Who could ever leave me, darling, Who could stay? Lachlan Brown, a behavioural psychologist, stated, analysing the lyrics of Taylor Swift's songs is enough to assume that she has an anxious attachment style. Her frequent references to intense emotional connections and the pain of separation are in line with an anxious attachment, which is characterised by a strong desire for closeness, often paired with a fear of being abandoned. What this behavioural psychologist fails to understand is that Taylor Swift, as an aware narcissist, is simply manipulating her fans. She is entirely confident in her ability to draw men in, have a romantic relationship with them, and then cast them to one side when she's bored, and then make it seem as if they are the problem, sing about it, and do so in a manner which causes her fans to buy her records by the bucket load. Very clever indeed. Dr. Mira Williams, a sex therapist, says if we dissect Swift's discography, it becomes worryingly apparent that her lyrics often reflect this attachment style. For instance, in Teardrops on My Guitar, she confesses that her love interest is all she thinks about at night, indicating an obsessive tendency associated with anxious attachment. Or, more accurately, narcissistic infatuation. In Forever and Always, she anxiously waits for a phone call that never comes, another sign of this attachment style. Then there's Red, which is filled with raw emotion and heartbreak. Again, what these experts are missing is that this is a narcissist, but a particularly evolved type of narcissist that is not only exhibiting the behaviours of a narcissist, but demonstrating how she is able to understand her fans and give them what they want so that they feel closer to her. Her songs are a masterclass in the art of mirroring and manipulation to cause the fans to believe, oh, Taylor's anxious, she's worried about these things, so that they feel closer to her, reinforcing the parasocial relationship. The article goes on with other songs as well, but essentially is repeating the same mistakes with regard to not realising what she is and how she continues to manipulate on a grand scale. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.